Moraga Superintendent, and you're going to hear lots of numbers, you've heard lots of numbers and statistics today. And one that surfaces this time of year is the number of PTA hours contributed at our school sites. And in Moraga, per school site, it's often over 10,000 hours per year. I'm sure it's very similar in your schools. I want to bring that up because I think it's important to recognize your contributions, not only at school sites, but on an advocacy level as well. It is very, very important that we keep adding to those hours so that our legislators continue to hear us. A little bit about Moraga, just because our structure is somewhat different compared to Acalanes and San Ramon. We're a relatively small school district. We have 3 elementary schools and 1 middle school. We're part of the La Marinda area, which includes Orinda, which is a little bit larger than Moraga, and next door is Lafayette, which is even a little bigger than Orinda. On occasion, we work whenever we can collaboratively with the Walnut Creek School District, and when we do, we call ourselves the Walla Marinda Consortium or group of schools. And there's a reason for that. We all feed into Dr. Nickerson's school district, so it's imperative that we work together. Breaking down some numbers a little bit more for the Moraga School District, just to give some perspective, we have an annual operating budget of about $16 million. Almost 25% of our funding comes from non-public sources, private funding, whether it's parcel tax or our foundation. Imagine how different our schools, and I imagine your schools, would be without that, on top of 5 years of budget cuts. And for a small district, what do those budget cuts look like? Well, after 5 years of missing out more than $9 million as a result of loss of funding due to deficit cuts, we've had to cut administration, maintenance, music, art, counseling, gardening programs for a small district over a 5-period year of time. That's resulted in over $1 million in reductions. I want to echo Denise's comments. I really appreciated your comment about scraping the bottom. I think it's important to recognize while Proposition 30 has supported our schools and has reduced mid-year trigger cuts, we are still at the bottom of that barrel, requiring lots of scraping to bring those funds back to our school sites. And I applaud your advocacy because we need to continue to push forward in order, as John had said earlier, to raise that base level while recognizing the need to support ELL students and low socioeconomic students.
So, what are the 2 most critical issues facing your district now, and what do you see as the critical issues coming down the road? Whoever wants to start can.
Well, I think probably for all of us, the implementation of Common Core is a critical issue. It's an exciting issue for educators. I don't know anyone who's been in education who isn't excited about the change to the Common Core standards, the change in the assessment. That will allow us to really use assessments for what if you're a teacher, were designed for, to figure out what your kids know and what you need to work on them with. It's not really true of our current assessments, which happen once in the spring. You get the results in August after you've already moved on to another school, another teacher. They're not really used to try to address what a student needs to learn. So getting all of our staff trained in Common Core is no easy task, especially when there are no funds to support that from the state or from the federal government. So that is a challenge, but it's kind of an exciting one, and it's what educators love to do, and we want to do that challenge. The other, obviously, is the one that has occupied most of our attention today, and that is the unstable nature of education funding in California. It is very difficult to plan our budgets when you don't know so much about what will be happening next year. I can't imagine another business where you do that, where you try to plan your programs for next year with no real clear idea of what the budget will look like.
I would echo those comments. First is going to be budget. We're facing a $200,000 deficit next year. That's with 25% revenue coming from non-public sources. So that is significant. And the year after next, that number quadruples. The second would be primarily the training for the implementation of Common Core standards. We need experts, we need time, we need materials. We need to bring our teachers up to an expert level in order to deliver this curriculum to the students in our district and surrounding districts. So those are the two most significant challenges that we're facing.
I'm not going to add anything new. Those are great challenges, and we are working on them. One thing I will add to kind of the budgetary challenge, and Bruce mentioned the structural deficit that they're addressing, and I believe San Ramon is trying to work their way out of a structural deficit. We receive, as I mentioned, almost 23% less funding than we should by statute. Now, we didn't have to make cuts to that degree. If we had cut 23% of our program, it would look much, much worse. We all made cuts. We all made very significant cuts. But we had very substantial grants coming in from the federal government. It was mentioned by our Congress members that there were 2 JOB Acts that came through. And that gave substantial sums of money to us as the state was cutting that enabled us to, yes, we cut back, but we didn't have to go to the degree we would have. Those monies are now gone. And does anyone out there think that the federal government is going to launch a new grant anytime soon? No. So it's kind of in the wake of that, we were able to get by and we were balancing our budgets, we made cuts, and now we have these structural deficits, and we are desperate to see some of the new money as Prop 30 stabilizes the state budget, as the economy, California economy, seems to stabilize and might be improving. We are desperate to see some of those new monies so that we can survive without making further cuts. We're not looking to expand programs in a large way. And with LCFF redistributing an inadequate amount of money, it's going to be challenging. And I know for our district, if LCFF is implemented as written, if you think about the average allocation of new money, we would see just over 40% of that. And so we just wouldn't see much of a share as California starts funding schools. And that's going to be a real big challenge.
So I wonder if, without getting into too much of detail, I'm sure that a lot of folks are surprised to hear there's a deficit next year. After all, what did we spend, what did we go out and approve Prop 30 for? So at least it would be, back to where we were, or a little bit more. Explain why it is that districts would face a deficit next year.
Well, I think it's because we didn't make the cuts we didn't have to make the cuts to the same degree that we would have because of the federal money, and that federal money was to be spent over a period of time, and that last year was the last year of that. I think that's a big part of it. I can speak for our district. We also had lost school days, and we had furlough days, and our employees made big sacrifices. That was a cost savings, but it helped to stabilize the budget. And it's very difficult to keep asking employees for that. Most public school employees across the state haven't seen any raise in 5 years. And to ask them to make continual sacrifices is getting more and more challenging. So I think, although the district hasn't increased the salary schedule in 5 years, in kind of the wake of that, it's tough to balance the budget going forward.